Okay, hello, Nudgestock. All right, let's get started. So I want to play a game with you. So we're going to toss a fair coin, and if it comes up heads, you're going to win a staggering 50% of your current wealth. And if it comes up tails, you're going to lose 40% of your wealth. Now you can play as many rounds as you would like. Let's imagine you start off with $1,000 and you toss the coin 4 times. So your wealth goes up and down, as you might expect, because you're tossing a coin. But in this example, if you stopped after 4 coin tosses, you would walk away with an extra $1,000. Now, of course, you might lose money, but you might win a lot of money. So I'd like you to remember that you can play for as little time or as long time as you would like. So I'd like you to think about this. Would you play this game? And if you said yes, I'm going to put you in the yay camp. And if you said no, I'm going to put you in the nay camp. And I want you to remember what camp you're in. Now, I didn't know what anyone in the audience looked like, so I drew everyone as sentient earplugs. I hope that's okay. So, judging from this outfit that Rory's wearing, I take it he's a bit of a risk taker. So we're going to imagine that he plays the game. So here he is playing the game once per minute for a whole hour. So you can see his wealth is going up and down. It's kind of randomly fluctuating, as you might expect. It's pretty noisy. It's hard to see if this is a good game to play. To get rid of some of this noise, what we can do is we can average over people. So let's take 10 Nudgestockers, or Nudgies, or whatever you call yourself. And here we are having them play independently, but then averaging their wealth at any one time. So here we see it looks like it might be a good game, but it's still quite noisy. So let's take that to the extreme and take 10,000 Nudgestockers. So here we see the noise is removed and we see a nice exponential growth curve there. So it turns out when we average over this many people, wealth grows at around 5% per minute, which is a pretty good growth rate. Now, what did we do here? We averaged over people. And I want you to ask yourself this. Is this average relevant to you, right, in your life? And that's a picture of you, by the way. It might be if Nudgestockers were sharing their lifetime cumulative wealth, but I don't remember that being in the terms and conditions when I registered. So what if no one's sharing their wealth? Well, we can take a different perspective, which is to take one person and we can track them over a much longer time scale. So here we're going to have Rory play the same game once per minute for a whole 24 hours with no toilet breaks. So here we see his wealth is kind of plummeting. Maybe it's not his lucky day. Maybe he's not wearing his lucky flat cap. Let's see how he does over a whole year. Again, playing once per minute for a whole year with no holidays. And we see it's a terrible game for him, right? His wealth has just come down to almost nothing. Now, Rory is just one person, so let's look at 10 other Nudgestockers, each playing the game. Now, instead of averaging them, we're going to just look at them independently. And here we see they're all having a pretty bad day, and they all have a pretty bad year. So it turns out when you average over a long time, the wealth of a typical person, randomly chosen, shrinks at around 5% per minute. So what's going on? When we averaged over people, wealth grew. And when we averaged over time, wealth shrank. Now, this is you looking confused, and I hope you're confused. Otherwise, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining. So let's think carefully about different types of average. We have what's called an ensemble average, which is an average over a group of people, basically. So it's an average of many people at a fixed point in time. That's the first average I showed you. On the other hand, we have a time average, which is taking one individual and averaging that one person over a long time. Now, if these two averages are equal, we say that the variable or quantity in question is ergodic. And if it's not equal, we say it's non-ergodic. right? So in this game, the changes in wealth were non-ergodic because the ensemble average was positive and the time average was negative. So what's going on? So we know that most players are losing money. I've shown you that already. So how is it possible that the ensemble average is going up? Well, people have different amounts of luck in terms of their coin toss. So for the very unluckiest, that will be people repeatedly tossing tails. Their wealth just simply shrinks a bit faster towards zero. On the other hand, if you look at the luckiest individuals who are tossing many, many heads, their wealth explodes very quickly upwards. And it's that explosion of wealth that pulls up the ensemble average, even though most people are losing money. It's an inefficiency producing game. Now, with your consent, I'd like to install what I'm calling the Ergodicity alarm. Now, it's going to monitor your stream of consciousness for the word average. So, for example, in the advertising sector, average returns are expected to be 13% higher than blah, 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 okay? So it hears the word average and it goes ding. And then it asks the following question. What kind of average is this? You have to figure out whether it's an ensemble or a time average or maybe some other kind. And then once you've answered that, you have to think, well, is this relevant to me or my situation or my club or my country or my company, right? Whatever you care about. Now let's test this alarm with a new game. So heads, you're going to win $50. Tails, you're going to lose $40. And again, you can play as long as you want, same rules as before. So again, ask yourself, and I mean this, ask yourself, would you play this game? So we can look at how people perform. So here is the average return over time. It's around $5 per minute. I said the word average. Ding! What kind of average is this? Okay, so you dig around, you find out. I'm going to tell you it's the ensemble average because I took all 10,000 Nudgestockers and I had them play independently and I averaged their wealth. So it looks like a good game from the ensemble, but is this average relevant to me? Well, probably not, because you're not sharing the wealth of the entirety of Nudgestock. Instead, let's look at the time average. Let's look at one individual playing over a very long time. Let's have one person play for an entire year. For this individual, their wealth goes from 1,000 to 3 million. That's a pretty good year, right? And again, their time average is $5 per minute. So what was the difference between the two games? They seem kind of similar, but they're fundamentally different. Well, the answer is that they have different dynamics. So what does that mean? Well, in the first game, we had multiplicative dynamics, right? So when you tossed a head, you win 50% of your current wealth. So that's basically multiplying your wealth by a factor of 1.5. And similarly, it's multiplying when you lose the money as well. So what you win or lose is interacting with how much wealth you have at any one time. Now, in this game, we found that the nays did best by not playing the game, because all the yays played, they all lost money, or nearly all of them lost money. So the nays did the best. In the second game, we had additive dynamics. So when you tossed a head, you won $50, or a tails, you lost 40, and it was the same 50 or 40 regardless of how much wealth you had, because what you win on any one round is not dependent on your wealth. In this game, it was the yays that did best because they enjoyed that lovely $5 per minute, whereas the nays didn't play, so they didn't enjoy that. Now, rather than thinking about categories of people, yays and nays, we can think about risk, people's attitude toward risk on a continuous dimension. So we're going to refer to these as risk attitudes. And at one end, we have risk seeking, which is self-explanatory. And at the other end, we have risk aversion, which basically means avoiding risk. And in the middle, we have risk neutral, which is neither risk seeking nor risk aversion. Now, it turns out that your wealth will grow fastest if you're in the multiplicative games, you are risk averse. In the additive games, you're risk neutral. And even there are games for which risk-seeking will grow your wealth fastest in games we're going to call exponential games. So this ergodicity theory basically says that if you're interested in your wealth growing at the fastest possible rate, you need to adjust your risk attitude to the situation you face. Whereas most, if not all decision theories, all other decision theories, assume that your risk attitude is fixed. It's like your personality. Captured by the following quote: "A person's capacity for risk can be no more changed than his or her nose." Now, we did an experiment to see which of these two theories is correct. Is it true that people can change their risk attitudes, or are risk attitudes fixed? So what we did, we endowed people with lots of money at the start of the game. Then we had them learn how different images affect this wealth. So they'll see an image and their wealth will change. They learn how the image causes changes in wealth, and then they make decisions between different gambles composed of those images. So on the right-hand side there, they're seeing basically two gambles. Do you want the left-hand gamble or the right-hand gamble? And it's a coin toss for which of the two outcomes you get. So we did this with images because we wanted to encourage people to make decisions instinctively rather than have their theory about what was best to do interfere with their decision-making. So we did this on 2 days. We had a multiplicative game and an additive game. So on the multiplicative day, basically they have a choice between one gamble and another, and they're just choosing between left and right, left or right. And we do this hundreds and hundreds of times with different unique gambles. On the additive game, it's the same, but they're playing for additive amounts instead of multiplicative amounts. They're doing this very, very quickly, once every 10 seconds. Okay, so if we look at this spectrum of risk attitudes, then, as before, in additive games, your wealth will grow fastest if you're risk neutral. And in the multiplicative games, your wealth will grow fastest if you're risk averse. So this is the prediction of the ergodicity theory. And if the classical theories are true, then your risk attitudes will not change because they're fixed. So we can look at the results that we got. So we see it's actually a pretty good prediction of people's behavior. It's not perfect, it's quite noisy. But we see a fundamental change from the additive game to the multiplicative game. People are changing their risk attitude. And if you look at the peak of those two curves, it's actually very, very close to what is the theoretical best you can ever do, which is kind of surprising. So these participants, they have no training in anything quantitative whatsoever. They've never even heard of ergodicity. So this is very much instinctive decision-making. So I'll just end with a taster of what I think ergodicity offers to behavioral science. Firstly, I think it offers a warning, which is that not all averages are equivalent, right? We've seen the time average and how that can be easily different from the ensemble average. And likewise, we need to think about which average is most relevant to us in our situation. And that's not at all obvious. Simplicity. It's an extremely simple game. You could argue it's very simplistic. It basically says people maximize time averages to grow their wealth faster. Now, I'm aware that behavior is a lot more complicated than this. However, the spirit of the theory is basically to see how much can we explain with the simplest possible assumption, and it doesn't get any simpler than this. And speaking of explanation, this theory goes beyond describing and it attempts to explain. So my favorite phenomena in decision making are risk aversion, temporal discounting, loss aversion, and probability weighting. Now it turns out that you can explain these phenomena in terms of a simple principle for maximizing your time average. And in doing so, you unify these different phenomena and glue them together. And it makes predictions for how they should co-vary when you change the situation. So that's cool. We don't know if it's a true theory. We don't know if it's a good theory. It's hardly been tested, but it makes for an exciting theory nonetheless. And my favorite feature of it is its falsifiability. So as a scientist, it makes very, very clear quantitative behavioral predictions, which makes my life easier for distinguishing it between other theories. And that's what I'm going to be doing with my team over the next few years, is try to distinguish between which is a better theory, this very, very simple theory, or slightly more complex other decision theories. So I'll just end by saying thank you to the co-authors, particularly David Medder and Finn Rape, who did most of the work. And also thank you to the theorists, particularly Ollie Peters and Alex Adamu. And thank you to a bunch of critics who've helped keep us on our toes. And thank you to my funders. And that's that.
Well, what do I say? I mean, I'm in awe, okay? I mean, this is hardcore, because one of the most important lessons, I think, is that evolved instinct in human approaches to risk might be more intelligent than economic theory.
Yes, I guess that's one way of putting it.
So actually what you're saying is that in many cases, loss aversion, for example, isn't a bias, nor is temporal discounting. It's simply that we've evolved to some degree, and not unreasonably, to see life as something that we live under multiplicative dynamics.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, it's not yet been properly tested, but the theory does predict that under multiplicative dynamics, which is arguably most of the situations in real life, yes, you should be more sensitive to losses than you are to gains, basically, and that goes with the risk preferences as well.
I mean, just to take the significance of this further, by the way, I'm going to talk about a few things which are very, very highfalutin. This explains why insurance actually benefits the economy. I think that's fair, isn't it? Whereas economists always saw insurance as being... So anybody in the insurance industry who wants to fund the Danish Institute for Magnetic Resonance, it's in your interest to do so.
Thank you.
The first point. There you go. That's a big plug. It explains why companies exist, arguably, because they're actually risk pooling entities. It explains why wealth redistribution might be economically beneficial, conceivably. So it has enormous implications, because if you think about it, am I right in saying that economics basically assumes that utility is an additive function?
In a sense, yes. By having an expected utility, you are assuming that the ensemble is relevant to your situation, essentially, and that only makes sense if it's additive. So yes.
So now I'm going to trivialize things. I do apologize for.
No.
I once took an idea from Nassim Taleb about minority rule, and it led to the creation of the build your own bucket for KFC in Australia. So if I had one talent, it's trivialization. But it's really, really important in our business, because we would tend to assume that 1 times 10 is the same as 10 times 1, even if one of those dimensions is time. And that's unsafe. So one of the arguments I'd make to our clients, creativity often exists. The best form of creativity is when everybody assumes something's true and they're actually wrong. Spotting a false assumption is one of the most valuable creative breakthroughs you can make. And you and Ollie and Alex have, I think, done that, and the Santa Fe Institute and the London Mathematical Institute. But in our business world, okay, we would tend to measure customer satisfaction as if it made no difference whether you pissed off 10 people once or if you pissed off one person 10 times in a row, because the kind of metrics we'd use wouldn't make the distinction between that.
Yeah.
It occurred to me, again, to trivialize, and I apologize for this, that your insight explains Amazon Prime, okay, in the sense that 10 people don't mind paying £3 for delivery once a month, but nobody, even pretty rich people, would be really content paying £3 for delivery 10 times in the same month. And so there are a lot of things. If there's the difference between multiplicative dynamics and additive is there's a carryover from the past. In the case of multiplicative dynamics, what happened in the past affects your future.
Yes.
Whereas in additive dynamics, everything can be considered as a one-shot game. Is that fair? Essentially.
Yeah, effectively, and that you have the same opportunities going forward. Yeah.
Yeah. This is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm going to try and get all our clients trained up in ergodicity, and we'll also feature an ergodicity special next year at our 10th anniversary Nudgestock. So all I can say is this has blown my mind. I've got a favour for you. If you could do the same work on sunk cost bias, because I've always been convinced that isn't irrational either.
Okay.
It's also worth remembering most people in behavioural finance are trying to make humans more like econs. And actually what we need to be doing is making econs actually instinctively more like humans. So this is really, really important for the whole behavioural science thing and what we consider normative in economics. So huge thanks. As you can see here, we've adopted the Fox News approach to broadcasting, which is where you have two unfeasibly attractive people and one fat old man. It's worked for them for years, so why shouldn't it work for us? So with that in mind, I'm going to pass back to Tara.